are back in the car on a Thursday as the sun starts to set on Long Island, New York. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Thursday early evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So since we've had such a good response to the Magnum Force episode, the second Dirty Harry film where, spoiler alert, Dirty Harry hunts down corrupt cops. Well, not really corrupt cops, but murdering cops. They're just randomly killing people, thinking that they're Dexter decades before Dexter. Well, they're bad guys, so we're just going to put 50 bullets in them, and maybe we'll kill a couple other people just to let them know we mean business. But the third Dirty Harry film, what I believe to be the weakest of the series, it has the most absurd plot. It has a lot of laughs, but many of them are unintentional. It was an enormous box office hit on a budget of $9 million. The third Dirty Harry film, which was originally titled Dirty Harry 3, Nail Meat Head, Dirty Harry 3, third Dirty Harry film, real creative. But at the last minute, some genius decided, why don't we call it The Enforcer? That's a good idea. At least that's a better title than Dirty Harry 3. But The Enforcer grossed $46.2 million worldwide against a $9 million budget. And once again, as I point out, 5 times plus production cost. That means the film was a substantial hit. It was also released right around Christmas. Magnum Force was released on Christmas Day, and the original Dirty Harry was released, I want to say, December 23rd. This was released December 22nd, 1976, which I assume was a Friday, right? But The Enforcer, even though the Rotten Tomatoes score, the worst quote-unquote Rotten Tomatoes score of the franchise, is the fourth film, Sudden Impact, which is running at 52%. The Enforcer is actually in the high 60s. I don't know how. I have no idea what movie they watched, but and the Deadpool is in the high 50s. The Deadpool's not even fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, you just wonder what they're smoking and what the critics were smoking or not smoking when they watch some of these movies. But The Enforcer, as was the case with the original Dirty Harry in 71, and for sure Magnum Force, with its kind of weighing of systems of justice. There's a great quote. Systems of justice, scales of justice. How far are you willing to go for justice? And what does the word justice mean to you? How far should police be allowed to go? Well, The Enforcer does not really get into any of the same stuff as the first two movies. There is a lot of political material on display, but none of it is pitched at the same angle. And again, this movie has more, or at least an attempt at a sense of humor, than either of the first two. And there are a lot of things in here that now look funny that I don't know if they were necessarily trying to be funny. But you also have a terrorist situation in this movie. You got a little John McClane Die Hard stuff going on, because a terror group built, or I should say comprised of angry Vietnam veterans, radicalized, angry, pissed off Vietnam veterans. They claim to have a political reason for all of the acts of terror, bombings, extortion, murder. They want to do this for the people in the manner of Patrick Swayze in Point Break, who seems to have an idea. He seems to have a political meaning for robbing all those banks wearing masks of the ex-presidents, right? We've been fucking you for decades as president. Now we're going to fuck you this way. Great stuff. But it turns out that this People's Revolutionary Force, or whatever they're called, they don't really have any point. They're just a bunch of rotten criminals using politics as subterfuge. Also in the manner of Hans Gruber in Die Hard, right? I'm a terrorist. Hey, look at me, I'm a terrorist. No, you're not. You're just a very good thief. And Powers Booth, in one of the all-time great guilty pleasure movies, Sudden Death, he claims to also be a terrorist. I'm doing this for the little guy. I'm doing this for that. And the other thing, no, he's doing it for $400 million or whatever the amount is. Because as Powers Booth famously points out, when Raymond J. Barry as the vice president, kind of wonders, why are you asking so much money? Why are you asking for so much money, bro? You might get 10 million, but asking for, I don't know how many 100 million, why would you ask for so much? What do you expect? this economy. Just pure gold. Well, in this movie, the People's Revolutionary Force, they purport to have a point, but they don't. They are anarchists. They are just criminal pieces of shit. And whatever political message they're trying to get across is all crap. We're doing it for the people. No, you're not. You're doing it to enrich yourselves. Maybe you got 1% of what you think is a point, which isn't really a point, and 99%, you all should be locked up forever. So into this crazed scenario steps our intrepid Inspector Harry Callahan. He survived the events of Magnum Force somehow, quit at the end of Dirty Harry, probably before either he got fired or got thrown in jail. They never really explain how he doesn't end up in prison, the events of the first movie. You know, we just kind of go with it because it's a movie, I guess. But Harry Callahan is not as interesting in either this film or, in my opinion, Sudden Impact. Sudden Impact is, to me, a more problematic movie even than The Enforcer. The Enforcer has a lot of problematic elements, which I'll get to. But this movie is very political, even if the political stuff doesn't feel as if we're being preached to or talked down to. But it is interesting as a historical document to go back in time and assess the number of issues which maybe were not as much of hot button issues then, but are now, especially in the social media era, in the age where everybody, even someone like myself, can have a microphone and, you know, connect with other people, and we can exchange ideas, maybe argue or maybe not argue. Maybe we agree, maybe we disagree. But The Enforcer puts Harry Callahan with a female partner. Puts Harry Callahan with a female partner. And Magnum Force, the one element of the film that I didn't mention, because, you know, you just run out of time. There's so much material that one can cover in, let's say, 25 to 30 minutes in something like this. You know, if I'm on with Bill Simmons and we're doing a roundtable discussing Magnum Force for 2 hours, we're going to get to more stuff. But in the original Dirty Harry, Harry Callahan begins the film. It seems that he's an inspector who works by himself, and that's fine. If you don't know anything about police work, as I really don't know shit, or what would the structure, what would the hierarchy be in San Francisco circa 1971, is it that crazy to think that somebody who has reached the level, the rank of inspector, would be working alone? I don't know. I would think that it's possible. But it turns out he's working alone in that movie because his partner is in the hospital recovering from what appears to have been a very serious wound that could have killed him. So he gets put with a partner, a wet behind the ears college boy, played really well by Rennie Santoni. A bit of trivia. He plays a character called Gonzalez, Chico Gonzalez, in Dirty Harry. And then 15 years later, and I know that Stallone did this on purpose, I give Sly credit, Rennie Santoni plays Sylvester Stallone. Marion Cobretti, greatest name in the history of cinema, Cobra, Marion Cobretti. Rennie Santoni plays Stallone's partner in that film, and his name is what? What's his name in that movie? His name is Gonzalez. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same guy, even though he left the police force in San Francisco at the end of the original Dirty Harry. I think that he has gone back to the police force, and now he's working the zombie squad with Marion Cobretti. But you had him teamed up, Harry Callahan, a man who hates every possible racial, socio-economic class. Harry hates everybody. So you partner him with a young man of Mexican descent. He doesn't like him, but the kid proves his worth. Well, in Magnum Force, not only does Harry Callahan have a romance with a woman of Asian descent, which he says, I've never done this before, and that was a little bit of an envelope-pushing thing, but his partner is black. His partner is played by a very talented young actor at the time, Felton Perry. And that was also a bit of an envelope push. Again, Clint Eastwood, 95 going on 96, old fogey. Clint Eastwood was always looking for a little bit more and to not do what people expected. So in The Enforcer, he's paired up with a female partner played by a really solid actress, a great TV star in later era, Tyne Daly. And this film, when I talk about how the politics are going to be looked at a little bit differently, this is a movie for the so-called DEI era. This is a movie for arguing either for or against quota systems, equal opportunity systems and situations, not just in politics, I mean across the spectrum of human experience. Because Harry Callahan is presented, and Clint, obviously, he gets a lot of laughs because of his antiquated views, and he's talking to this woman on the city council, and she seems to insult him, so he gives it back to her tenfold, and it's probably the biggest laugh in the movie. He's like, well, what do you think should be the proper response if Miss Wilson over there propositions me, meaning if this woman asks me for sex, what are we supposed to do? It's great stuff. And even Tyne Daly's character is laughing. But Harry doesn't want to work with a woman partner because he thinks she's only here to fill a quota. And, in 1993's In the Line of Fire, when Clint Eastwood is making nice to Rene Russo because, as much as he's trying to save a president and he wants to take down John Malkovich's assassin, he wants to get Rene Russo's clothes off almost as bad, if not as badly. But his way of seduction in that movie is to just keep insulting her. I would say, pro tip, don't do that in real life. That's not how you get there. Take it from me if you want to. Don't do that. But in that film, he suggests that Rene Russo's Lily Raines is only in the position that she's in. Yes, you're a good agent, Agent Raines, but you're here because the president wants to look good for his feminist voters. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the truth. So she gives it back to him. She says, what demographics do you represent, Agent Horrigan? He goes, let's see. White piano-playing heterosexuals over the age of 50. There aren't many of us, but we do have a powerful lobby. And then he winks at her, and the point is made. The two of them are on even footing. But Clint does not want a female partner. He thinks that she's only here because she's a woman, and somebody in an ivory tower decided we have to fill out our roster this way. And Clint, as Dirty Harry, who hates everybody, goes along, and he is not happy. He does not think she belongs. Now listen, he's not going to do anything to torpedo her or sabotage her, but his perception is he is more likely to get killed with her as his partner because he just thinks that she doesn't know what she's doing. She's a greenhorn and she's a woman. She should be doing something else. It is not a coincidence. It is not an accident that, spoiler alert, Tyne Daly's character saves Harry's ass on how many occasions in this movie? She is worthy. She is a great cop. It just took her a little time to get used to the pace of what they're doing. So that's an interesting twist and an interesting slant that the movie puts on this. That it sets up Harry Callahan, Clint's not that old in the world of this movie. He's 45. And I think he's probably playing, right around what his real age would be at the time. He's 45, 46 when this movie was shot. But it puts him in a position of looking down on the system and the government that would have her working with him. How could she be an inspector? How could she be one rank below inspector? What are her qualifications for that? It's like in the movie Aliens when they're asking the guy who's running the mission, how many combat drops have you done? 2, simulated. Hey, what the fuck kind of answer is that? This guy is leading the mission and he has no real time doing this? Well, talk about leading the lambs to the slaughter, right? So the contortions of plot in this movie, it's just not that interesting. And this People's Revolutionary Force takes the mayor hostage and they engage in all manner of terrorist incidents, across the city of San Francisco. And in a little bit of a foreshadowing, if you will, the climax takes place on Alcatraz Island. And I don't know if this had anything to do with why Clint Eastwood ended up making the movie about the only apparent successful breakout from Alcatraz 3 years later. It was shot about two and a half years later, Escape from Alcatraz. But I like to think that Clint became interested in Alcatraz because they shot scenes there. But who knows? I've never read. Maybe if you have, you can point it out in the comments because I'm going to forget to even Google it, I'm sure. But I mentioned problematic elements, and there are certain things that you allow certain characters to say, and Harry Callahan lets out a couple of slurs, I guess would be the right word, that are not in common usage anymore, and that's a good thing that they're not in common usage anymore. And I feel like, well, for sure, there are TV edits of this movie you could watch right now that just get rid of the words entirely. And it's always almost a little stupid to talk about it this way, but when you imagine words getting bleeped when they're edited either for television or for content or something like that, if they have to show them on a plane, when you have a word that is under a different circumstance is a perfectly fine word representing, let's say, a vegetable or something like that, having to bleep that word, you could argue is, I mean, it's funny if you want to say that it's humorous, but I understand. And if they could do it again, I feel like they would not have gone in that particular direction, because all of the other political stuff in the movie I think is fascinating in current day. This movie's now almost 50 years old. It would be released 50 years this December. All of the stuff about the concept of quotas, the concept of just because a person may be here to fill a quota, that does not in and of itself mean that they are not qualified. And there is a difference between saying somebody should not be at the level of inspector or real close without having, I don't know how many arrests or how many hours out in the field, but that doesn't mean that they are not a really good cop and will not take a bullet for their partner. And that's the one area where this movie, to me, really succeeds. I don't know whose idea it was to cast Tyne Daly, but she really brings it. And the way that her character arcs throughout the second half of the story, really, really good work. And if her and Clint don't have great romantic chemistry, they have great chemistry on screen as far as cop partners. And the level of respect that Callahan feels as he realizes she's not only no shrinking violet, but she's a good cop. And I was wrong about this. And he's not the kind of guy that would apologize. But it's to Clint's credit, from the actor perspective, the sort of subtle work that he does with his eyes and his body language when he realizes that she's a hell of a cop. And the movie wraps up. It doesn't go exactly the way that we expect, or at least the way I certainly the first time watching it, edited for television on Channel 11 when I was like 13 or 14 years old. But the movie, it's okay. I still think this is the weakest of the 5 Dirty Harry films. I would rank this at 2.5 stars. Sudden Impact, despite being way more, in my opinion, problematic than The Enforcer, or Magnum Force for that matter, Sudden Impact to me is very entertaining all the way through. And I watched The Enforcer. There are stretches of the film where I feel like they could have just cut out, like you could have cut 10 minutes out of this movie and you wouldn't miss any of it. But it did, again, strike a nerve with audiences, especially in the US. People wanted to see it. It played well. It does have, the big action moments, the kind of grounded special effects, if you will, and the good stunt work as you would expect from, a high quality production with Clint. And it is a fascinating product of its time. And that it was 7 years before another Dirty Harry film came out. Now, I don't know in the interim whether Clint just wanted to do other projects, because I can give you what he did in the interim. He did The Gauntlet. Actually, he had just come off the Eiger Sanction, which was a really, really difficult shoot. I'm going to for sure have to do an episode on that movie. That was the single most arduous shoot of Clint's career. He plays a professor who's actually a spy. He's like a James Bond kind of guy named Jonathan Hemlock. That's not a good name. Jonathan Hemlock. And he's a spy, and he's also a mountain climber, and he ends up climbing the Eiger. But that was a very arduous shoot. There was a stuntman that was killed, and a different version of a shot. It would not have been a stuntman. It would have been Clint, who died on a mountain making that movie in 1975. Thank goodness that didn't happen. But The Enforcer was an easier shoot by far than the Eiger Sanction. But then Clint did The Gauntlet. There was some talk they were doing a remake, that Glenn Powell was involved. Tom Cruise had circled it at a certain point. I don't think that it's going to happen. I haven't seen any confirmation of it. It's okay. Then he did the Any Which Way But Loose movies, but in between Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can is when Clint Eastwood in 1979 did Escape from Alcatraz, which is just a fantastic film. that might be the most like undersold great movie in Clint's career. He didn't direct that. His buddy Don Siegel, who directed him and Dirty Harry, among others, did that movie. But Clint also did Bronco Billy in 1980. He did Honky Tonk Man, and he did Firefox, a very strange science fiction action Cold War thriller. I still don't have any idea what they were going for, but the movie is entertaining and has a really great musical score by Maurice Jarre. Just fantastic, kind of up-tempo, new age, old school music score. One of his best. He's a great composer. But yeah, it was 7 years after The Enforcer before Sudden Impact came out, and I'll get to that next time. But I just wanted to go over my thoughts on The Enforcer without completely ruining the entire movie for you. It's a worthy entry. It is, to me, the weakest. It's a 2.5 star out of 4 movie. There's just a lot of stretches where not that much happens, and the kind of kidnapping plot, they kidnap the mayor, hold him for ransom. It's not as exciting as it could be or as it should be. But you still have the man from El Paso at the center, holding court and holding the action in the center. And yeah, he's surrounded by plot armor, so you know he's not going to get bumped off here. But Clint does the best he can with kind of limited script. And as I say, Tyne Daly she's really great. And the fact that audiences came out to see it in many cases more than once, it played beautifully for 1976 going into 1977 audiences. And it's not like, it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. I just think that the original and Magnum Force and the last one, The Deadpool, are so much better than The Enforcer and Sudden Impact. I just think that the first movie is 4 stars, and Magnum Force is 3.5, and The Deadpool to me is also 3.5, and The Enforcer is 2.5, and Sudden Impact 2.5 to 3. But we'll get to that another time. I hope you've enjoyed my discussion of Dirty Harry 3, the third film in Clint Eastwood's iconic franchise, the Dirty Harry franchise, where the first 3 movies and then the fourth one, dollar for dollar, was the biggest hit in the franchise, Sudden Impact. But Magnum Force, huge hit. Dirty Harry, enormous hit, and a lot of critical acclaim across the board. And The Enforcer, critics responded, I think it's in the high 60s in Rotten Tomatoes, and it did gross more than 5 times its production cost. And I think all of the Dirty Harry films, I don't know if they're still on. I know they were all on HBO Max at a certain time, which would make sense because HBO Max, WB, Clint Eastwood, like, this is also very, very much on brand and what you would expect, because Clint Eastwood has had offices on the Warner Brothers lot since literally 1968, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. So I'm going to spare you the exaggerated wrap-up. If you haven't seen any of the Dirty Harry films, I suggest you start with the first one, which is a masterpiece. It is a great film. It is one of the best movies of the 1970s, and it is top 3 best Clint Eastwood performance. So on this Thursday night, as the sun continues to set, I hope you have a great rest of your night, and thanks for tuning in to my discussion of Dirty Harry 3, 1976's The Enforcer. Peace.